coming on the show. Always a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you, Nitin, for having me.
Wonderful, Vani. So, Vani, for those that may be watching that may not be aware of you and what you do, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So, my background has been in business-to-business marketing, and I've worked for across different industries and various companies. So starting with like Ecolab, GE, Cisco, so pretty large companies. And I started my career in customer insights, but then went on to run businesses for these different companies, either a business or, an industry sector. And then most recently, I'm working for Diversey in Fort Mill, South Carolina. I am the Vice President of Customer Insights and Communication.
So, I know just from our prior conversations and knowing you, you've had such a diverse and rich background in different organizations. In your current role, what does your leadership depend on you for in your day-to-day or in your professional responsibilities?
So, when it comes down to really our strategic priorities, right? We define those, and I'm part of that team and the process. But sometimes what happens with most companies, right? We tend to be very short-term, focused, and that's what drives the priorities. Even though we do try to balance it out with the longer-term priorities. So with my current company, for example, right? We recently have gone public, and the priorities are, they vary, right? Like I said, they could be short-term, they could be long-term. But when it comes down to metrics specifically, right, and what is expected with, whether it's customer insights, experience, marketing, right, it comes down to show me the money. It's, can we drive top line growth and profitable bottom line growth?
So, that's something a lot of your peers are also on the hook for, right? In their responsibilities. Can you talk a little bit, Vani, on some of the challenges that you experience when you're trying to fulfill that mandate on really helping organizations like yours drive foresight from the data, from the insight that you collect? Help us understand some of the challenges that you face and how you overcome them.
Absolutely. So, when you think about marketing or customer insights, right? First of all, the way I look at my role and, my current role specifically. So it really starts for me with getting the customer input, right? And then it goes on to engaging with the customer through, their buyer journey, through the different touch points, and having, done digital marketing, working through social media, and like I said, most recently communication, right? What I'm tasked with is then making sure that we start with the customer and we end with the customer by delivering a great customer experience. And we talked about some of the metrics, right? So when it comes down to top line and bottom line growth, now sometimes that is a little challenging also, because when you look at our business, especially in B2B industries, some of the impact of marketing or customer insights, it's a little bit longer term. And part of it is just the nature of our sales cycle, right? In business to business, it tends to be a much longer sales cycle. And, sometimes we don't always talk about things like improving sales productivity or increasing our customer loyalty or NPS score. Sometimes it's about share of wallet. Those do become a little secondary, but the issue is that sometimes those are, I wouldn't say equally important, but we lose a little bit of the perspective on that. And then specifically in terms of some of the challenges, right? Like with customer insights or just customer in general. So I'll give you an example, like actually from all the companies that I've worked with. The issue is that we rely too heavily on voice of business and internal hypothesis. Now, the good thing is that we do start with some internal hypothesis, so we're not just necessarily, shooting darts in the dark, but, and it's not right or wrong, right? We are all the time having customer conversations. The issue for, really driving that to success is about the consistency. You want to remove the biases. We have casual conversations or we have sales conversations. Are people documenting those? People ask questions in different ways. Sometimes the other thing that I found is that we want to, validate what we believe in or what our value proposition is or the products that we are bringing to market. And sometimes it is tough to hear that hypothesis being refuted. Now, one example, is from my days of working for GE. That was one company that actually dealt with sort of bad news well. And, as a specific example, right, I was working on one of these projects that required a really big capital investment from the company and the business. We spent about a year, doing a lot of customer insights. I traveled around the world talking to different customers. We did focus groups. We did conjoint analysis. We did, a lot of different, segmentation. And the final analysis actually showed us that we were headed in the wrong direction. The appetite for, that particular product that we were thinking of rolling out was not what the customers wanted. But the company and the business was able to take those learnings and pivot the business and say, all right, rather than investing in, a new innovation that is not going to really get us much of the market share, why not divert those resources on existing products and maybe making those better? Now, interestingly, right, we were right in that 2008, 2009 down cycle. So the decision ended up being a very good one for the company. But I've seen with other companies that can be sometimes a challenge. If the hypothesis is not validated and customers come back and say something that we weren't expecting, it's tough to stomach that. The other thing also is, and again, I'm sure this isn't anything that's rocket science, right? We all tend to work in silos. We get so busy that it's all our different functions, right? Everyone's moving at breakneck speed, so you don't always have time to just pause and work together. And then like I said, the last thing really is about the long sales cycles, right? So the thing is that it is a little bit challenging when you look at sometimes conversion of customers and leads that come in. It could be almost a year out. So let me pause there and see, is that what you were thinking? Is
Oh yes, oh yes. I'm when you started talking about the hypotheses and how sometimes companies have a hard time digesting or accepting the voice of the customer, I mean, that connects, and that's going to connect with a lot of people. I'll share a personal experience with you that has happened with me several times. As a customer journey and a mapping firm, our roots are also in insights and research. And I remember often, the first time I saw it, I was surprised. Now I no longer am. But, we'll have clients come to us, large companies, very well-known brands, and they'll come to us and they'll show us infographic that's labeled as a customer journey map, right? And so I'm looking at it and my team's looking at it, and I'm talking about the first time this happened several years ago. And we said, wow, this looks like really good insights. And it looks like you've mapped it out really well as well. How many customers did you speak with? And they go, oh, we didn't really talk to any customers. We developed this internally. And we spoke with our friends in marketing and operations. And I said, how many? And they said, oh, we spoke with one person over there and one over there. So in total, it was 4 people throughout the company at different levels that had gotten together. They had mapped out the customer journey, and the company had been making multi-million-dollar decisions based on that journey map. And it was all good till it was working, and then it wasn't working, right? And so I think that's another perspective on what I started reflecting on as well, because that's one part of it. I feel that what you're talking about is the other end of that spectrum also, that when you do get the voice of the customer in, and if it doesn't match with what you were thinking, I think it's really important to do what GE did, which was, well, let's listen to that. instead of ignoring that, moving forward, and then getting your hands burnt.
Absolutely. And again, like what you said, right? I mean, so a lot of times I will actually tell the business that let's start with voice of business, and let's uh, lay out our internal hypothesis, because that you have to start somewhere, right? But then let's definitely go validate it. So what we've been trying to do is a little bit of both, right? And this is again something that we always did at Ecolab also, where we would talk to the salespeople or our technical service people, but internal people, right? And then we would go and validate those with customers. And one of the things that I saw is, which was very positive, for the business, because sometimes you learn something from your, internal people, and then you learn something completely different from customers, but then you do a gap assessment. And that's where what is very powerful for me is that let's just call it value proposition, right? If we are selling certain benefits and of product or service or solution, but customers are perceiving completely different benefits, or somewhat different even, that is also a really good nugget of learning for me, because then we need to sort of retrain, rethink what the conversation needs to be with customer. Because again, you start talking to customers about things that they don't want to talk about, you lose them. But if you can speak in their language and with what's of interest to them, then you've got their attention, right? And one of the things that I've seen over sort of the course of my career is, most companies even today, right, you lead with the company. When you start having conversations with customers, it's always about, well, let me tell you why our company XYZ is good, and what are the things that we can do for you, versus really listening to what the customer needs are, what their pain points are, what are the outcomes that they are trying to work towards, and then tailoring our message to be able to help the customers, partner with them, and solve for those challenges.
Right. Now, for those watching in, I want to underline what you just said, especially in terms of the gap analysis part. I think that is something really strategic and something really savvy that you do, Vani. And that is something we recommend to our clients as well. So, when we start out a project, when we brought in, especially for any type of research or customer journey work, there is a lot of value that lies within, or, the intelligence that, or the experiences that lie within a company. And at no point, should anybody watching this feel like either you or I are saying that we should discount it. What we're saying is build on it, right? So that's where that gap analysis part also comes in, because in our practice, that's something we recommend, where when we begin a project, we'll do this workshop with clients where we'll assess all their research. We'll even have team leaders from different departments come in, especially if it's a journey project, where we want to come understand how different teams view the different stages of the customer's journey, right? And what happens in these meetings, Vani, also is these gaps come out, where one department might be looking at the same stage of the customer's journey, or the problem or the pain point that a customer is having, and they might have an opinion or maybe data around why that problem is happening. And another department may be having their viewpoint or their data on why that's happening. And sometimes these are contrasting to each other. And for us as researchers and journey experts, what really comes out to us is, okay, that's a gap in understanding, right? Or that's a hypothesis moment. Now let's go design the research and go validate. Or, that's where the gap analysis part, I think, that you were referring to also comes in, where now let's get the viewpoint of the customer and get a sense of, what is going on really with them, right? And so I think that's a really, really important point that you've raised. We completely concur with that. And that is something that, we recommend as well, that companies should be doing, where it's not just relying on the customer completely or discounting your internal insights or expertise, but sort of building on it. And then, like you said, then also having the maturity and the confidence that if the data comes back, and if the customer voice of the customer comes back and says something that's off, then maybe that could also be a pivot point, like what you did and what your teams at GE did earlier on, as opposed to staying the course and not getting to your destination.
Right. Again, completely agree with that, right? But one thing that you highlighted, this is just my personal perspective, right? That's based on my experience with the different companies, and by no means this is meant to be prescriptive or again, everyone has different experiences, and part of it is also, right, there are times when you work at a company, there are macro challenges and issues that are going on that are not in anyone's control. And again, we have to be really careful about that too, because one of the other points that you made, which I also agree with, and I want to make sure that we really do acknowledge that there is a lot of expertise in the companies, right? So when I rattled off all the companies I've worked for, and I've mentioned 4 different companies, right? So obviously I'm not a lifer at any of these companies, and I worked in different industries. But one thing that I learned early on, and it was one of my managers at Ecolab, and he said to me at that time, he said, Vani, you're coming in young and new, and you're going to be eager to bring forth ideas and make changes. He said, but first thing you need to do is really learn about the culture of the company, adapt yourself to the culture, the people, learn, and then start to implement and recommend the changes. And I've actually taken that to heart, because you can walk into a company as a newbie, and I don't mean newbie in terms of the level, but just as the new person in. I've again worked with people who've been in the company for 20 plus years. They have tremendous expertise. They've worked across different functions, and it is really important to take that perspective into consideration. And that's why that sort of internal hypothesis developing, right, really comes into play also, because these are the people who are the experts in the industry, in the with the competitors, with just the business, and they really are your sort of powerhouse in that company that you can rely on and tap into. And a lot of mistakes sometimes marketers make that I've seen is also that you totally dismiss the work that has been already done in the company, and rather than building on it. And
Right.
again, so when I look at even research companies that I partner with, right, part of it is that I've actually taken some of the companies that I worked with, when I first started out in customer insights, and have partnered with them through the course of sort of my career. Because I find when they come in, they also spend time to learn about the business. They look at the work that's already been done. What is the learning that they can take? And so again, to use marketers love to use trite words and all, like, rather than reinvent the wheel, right? It's how do we build on that, how do we improve on it? And again, I mean, there are some of these customer insights practices and all that have been that precede me also, and precede you, and they work, right? It's just that some now with technology and social media and all, things have changed. So that's where you adapt also, but it's you tap into the resources that you have.
Right. So Vani, I want to ask you, given these different organizations that you worked at, given the learnings that you've had, I want you to explain or talk about a project that you did where you came across a specific challenge. That was a business challenge, that was a research challenge. And can you talk and help us understand how you uncovered insights? What was the process you followed? And ultimately, what was the end result on the customer's experience, or on their journey, or on the business? What was the impact of your work? Any case studies or any examples that you want to share?
Sure. So I'll share one, most recent one that I'm actually just finishing up with. But this is a digital journey mapping that we've done currently in my company. And part of it, like, the reason behind it was that we want to drive more organic traffic to our website, right? We want to be able to go tap into new, customer segments. and new sectors, and really get people interested in the company, right? Because sometimes the growth, you can only get so much more growth from your existing customers, and you want to play in other areas. And as we all know, the digital space is really growing. So let me talk to you a little bit about that example of the lead generation project that I've just completed, and the customer journey mapping work that we've done and what we did with that, if that sounds all right, Nathan.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds interesting.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit, right? So let me just level set a little bit again. So, again, when we talk about customer buying journey, right, this isn't something that's entirely new. I mean, this goes back, decades with, you'll be definitely aware of this, and most marketers know this, right? This is like marketing 101. It's like the AIDA funnel, right? You've got the awareness, interest, desire, action. Now, in different companies, we've looked at it a little bit differently, where you look at awareness, interest, add on, consideration, purchase, which is your trial basically. And then, there's that other level that I feel like the AIDA funnel really missed, was about customer loyalty and retention, right? And that's what really then leads into customers becoming advocates. And rather than a funnel or a linear process, it becomes really more circular, because as marketers, right, again, we know this, that customer acquisition is a lot more expensive than customer retention. You do want your customers to become repeat customers. Hey, and wouldn't we all love it if our customers start to tattoo a brand on their body, right? Doesn't really happen in the B2B world, but it's like the classic joke, right, among marketers, that if you can really make your customers the ultimate advocates. So what we've done with our most recent project is with through lead generation, right? It's for a specific business in the company that we want to grow. We want to get, like I said, target sort of new customer segments, new sectors. At the moment, the focus is still, more with this pilot project was in our, US market. But we went through a 4-step sort of buyer journey. And, in the digital world, we talk about it as a drip campaign, right? So it's awareness. We kind of took those 3 or 4 stages, right? But this is through our own learning and some of the customer insights work that we did before we really identified these 4 stages, is through understanding the customer needs, their pain points. We did some customer persona work so that we can really understand what are the decisions our customers are trying to make, what are their needs, what are their goals, how are their decisions influenced by those goals. And then, as you know, with the persona work, right, you look at empathy maps, you look at the personality, you try to figure out what are the key messages, the way you want to communicate with them, right? Like the tone we want to use, customer quotes, because all that really helps us connect with customers. Now, we also know, right, you can have so many different personas of customers, because these days it's all about personalization, it's all about customization. But at the end of the day, that's not very practical, right? When you have to look at it from user journeys. And so we try to narrow it down a little bit and say, okay, maybe we look at it by different sectors, who are the key decision makers, or in business to business, because it's really influencing sort of an environment where you don't have one decision maker, or you could have 1 or 2 decision makers, but you have influencers, you have end users, right? So maybe you look at a few of those different personas. So we did a lot of that work. So that was all really positive, right? So the 4 steps that we identified were awareness, selection, implementation, and validation. And let me explain those a little bit more. So it's a little bit more compressed than a normal maybe customer buying journey, but again, because we invested some time to learn about those steps. Awareness, as it's the most obvious one, right? It's about making people aware of your brand, that as a company you exist. What do you do, right? And we kind of bypass sort of the interest consideration phase, because again, these days when you look at digital, right, customers are a lot savvier. They do a lot of their homework before they even interact with the company. So I feel like it really does compress your buying journey, your user journey pretty quickly. So, the selection is more about product information. What is the content they're looking for? And helping them really connect with the company, with the people. And then implementation for us was really about using the products, because again, in a business to business world, there is, sometimes training required with how to best use the products. There's procedures, and then there's also the validation phase, which for us is the sort of the proof of the concept for the customer, right? So this is what makes them advocates. If we can actually validate that our products work for them, if we can give them certification that they're using our products, and it gives them maybe a competitive advantage in the industry, in the marketplace, or with their end customers ideally. So those were the four phases that we identified as part of this project. So let me just pause there before we get into a little bit more about our learnings and challenges, and give you an opportunity to maybe ask some questions. Or
yeah, Vani, so that sounds like a good, interesting project. It also seems like this was a very robust effort. What tools or techniques did you use? Was this a mixture of qual, quant, behavioral, or can you talk a little bit about what went into getting these insights?
Yeah, so we touched upon some of this, right? So I'll be really honest. I mean, part of this was, in an ideal world, it would have been all of the above. I think with us, it was a little bit more piecemeal. Some of the work, it wasn't so sequential. It wasn't just done right before this particular, launching into this project. So this was work that was, done earlier by different even sectors and businesses or regions. But we, did our due diligence and audit and kind of cobbled it together to make it work for us. I can, definitely talk about similar experience in a different company where we actually did a lot more work, right? So just to be able to address that. So I did want to clarify that we didn't really go through such a rigorous sort of process for this project in the company. But in the past, what we have done is, right, so when we go through like the tools and techniques, we've done both qualitative, quantitative, very robust. So these days, again, so that ethnography research is back, right? It's actually watching your customers interact with your, whether it is your products or it is the shopping experience, it's the digital tools, but you can do, A/B testing, whatever that is, right? I mean, everyone, has their toolbox, and whoever research partner that you also work with, right, will help you identify that based on what objectives you have. And then, of course, it's a mix of both qualitative and quantitative, right? In the past, we've even had customers maintain like diaries and journals. Now, the reason I said that we were not able to do such a robust methodology is, if you look at the last year, right, with the pandemic, a lot of our customer sites have been kind of, affected by the pandemic, and closed down also. So a lot of our customers are, now getting back and getting ready to reopen. And that's what also dictated the timing and some of the constraints we had. But I did want to touch upon that, again, just drawing on my experience, that we did do some, pretty robust techniques, and talk to customers, did focus groups, did, quantitative, process, purchase process mapping, just to understand what those touch points are. And really start to look at, the journeys in terms of not just talking to 10, 20 customers, but upwards of 400 customers, so that you can, start to look at it again by, the different sort of end use customer segments that you have. Does the same journey make sense for all those sectors that you might have or not?
Right. Now that's, thank you for clarifying that, Vani. The reason I brought that up was, even now in the journey mapping world, because we are in this world, we get to see a lot of work that companies do internally, or companies that or work that gets done by other agencies, other research firms. And there are a lot of companies that do really very good journey work. But even now, what we see happening is, the majority of the work is still in that, mushy, data-less, sort of sphere, right? where we'll see journey maps around what I shared with you earlier, where it's just the collective insight, which is not bad, but it's, our critique over there is, don't call it a customer journey map if you have no input from the customer. Then that's your internal process map or your internal viewpoint, whatever you call it, right? And then there are journey maps that are done that have maybe just a qualitative component. Right now, as you pointed out correctly, ethnographic work is back in we're seeing a lot of that. I mean, it never went away in a way, but now we're seeing a lot of it. And that makes sense, because with the pandemic, a lot of companies want to understand how customer behaviors are changing, how that's impacting, how they make their decisions, right? So that's a key component of what we recommend to clients as well, that, you don't have to make the dish perfectly baked every time. And I think that's what you did as well, was where you did, you used what was available, and you didn't try to go do the qual, the quant, and the mobile, everything. But the point I was trying to make for anybody watching was that that's, also don't be satisfied with what's gotten done, build on it. And maybe one way to build on it would be maybe to get some real-time ethnographic work input in, if that can take your map to the next level. If you feel like it's not delivering on what you wanted, or maybe throw in some, if you feel like you got good insights, but they're still a little bit qualish, where you're getting insights, but it's directional, then maybe go put in some quantitative muscle around it, right? So I guess my message to anybody watching would be, do what Vani did, where if you don't have if you don't have everything available, then make do with what you had, but then continue to build on it.
Absolutely, because Nathan, again, right, we have to be very practical as marketers. You not, just because maybe you don't have the ability, because like in my case, right, customer locations were shut down. Sometimes you don't have access to funding the way you would like to, to be able to undertake some projects, because some of the research is not cheap, right? But so what is it that you can do? And again, this is something that, we all have to decide collectively in our companies, right? And with the key stakeholders, what works for us. And again, it's not really about cutting corners, because sometimes also the problem is that, it can lead to us not taking, status quo, right? Accepting that and not doing anything even. In my case, with this particular project, right, it was actually, if I look at it, right, and and try to balance and weigh the pros and cons of the spend and sort of, the risk and reward, right? Just very simply put. And we can very quickly learn. So we did have some learnings that, we can talk about in a minute here, but from our project, but it isn't, what I would call, it's not like a lot of skin off my back, right? I mean, we had some really good learnings. We can implement those, we can change and move forward. We can test this out in another market. Going forward, we can do it better. Now, at my previous company, the reason that we did have to do, go through, sort of all the hoops and do it qualitatively, quantitatively, get a robust customer sample, was we were going to make some really big investments in terms of digital transformation. And that's where, you have to, that was the point I was trying to make, that you have to really evaluate the risk, right? You don't want to put so much resources in the company behind a project that is totally based on internal hypothesis and is not, where you haven't partnered with a firm even that can help you with that customer journey mapping. And, that can help you with that digital transformation and eventually execute on that, right? Because you're going to start building your wireframes. You're going to start making some heavy investments into your digital platforms. And I mean, I'm talking about it from a digital perspective, right? But this could be, maybe if it's more product related, you have to do some, tooling and manufacturing changes, your R&D processes and investments. So again, regardless, right? If there's a really solid investment and resources in terms of people also, and you might need to hire for different roles, then it's worth spending the money and the time. You don't want to cut corners there.
Right. No, absolutely, Vani. ROI and risk and reward is obviously we have to be practical, like you said. Uh, I'm curious to know, so the results or the impact of this effort, how did that go?
Yeah, so let me share that with you. Actually, we had some really good learnings. And, obviously, can I say that can we go back and do things a bit differently? Yeah, always, right? But I think what we found is that really high level, right? So because of my particular project that was more with lead generation and related to our website and bringing more traffic. So what we found is that obviously there are areas that we need to improve our content, right, and the accessibility of that content. So in the digital world, right, people recognize as call to action. What is that to get someone interested in partnering with you and learning more about your business? So moving from that awareness stage to even the selection stage, right? So we learned a lot about what are the top keywords that work for us. What type of customers, or I'm using the word customers a little bit broadly because we were obviously going after new customers or new users. But who are we attracting with that particular campaign, right? And what is their profile? What are the type of companies? We tested out some of our different ads that we had. We looked at LinkedIn versus paid search versus organic traffic. So we had some really good learnings with that, and we could look at the ROI of the click-through rates, the uh, sort of the lead generation. We looked at now here are some of the things that we could have done better. Our campaign actually ran for about a month, and we knew that that wasn't ideal. But again, we wanted some really quick learnings. We wanted to make this more of an agile process. But in an ideal world, you want a campaign like this in the digital world to run for about 4 to 6 months to really start to reduce your conversion costs. The other thing that's really a big driver of everything I've seen is especially with customer journey maps or anything that really involves improving or enhancing your customer experience, right? It's a lot of it comes down to change management, and that is really top down. I mean, there's I'm hard pressed to make the argument for that, saying that that can be grassroots level. You can start to make those changes, but your leadership team has to be on board. And I'm not just talking in terms of investment, right? Here I'm truly talking in terms of the company culture, the behavior, living and breathing those values every day, whether that's your strategic plan or the changes you want to make. It has to be cross-functional. Even with our project, right, some of the delays we had were if the teams were not working together or we weren't getting input from some of the other teams. Another big learning is also when you start to get your leads, right, are you acting upon them fast enough? Are you scoring and qualifying those leads? Are you passing them on to the right people in sales? Is sales actually doing something with the leads, or are they just sitting? I mean, we've generated even let's say they've gone through the qualifying process, right, the marketing qualified leads, the sales qualified leads, but if no one has taken action, and these days, right, especially a week passes, 2 weeks pass, customers get impatient and they don't have the time to wait around, right? What a lot of companies are also doing is they've got live chat features on their website. We live in a world of instant gratification, right? So we have to be very responsive. So again, one of the things that we have to think about when we do these type of any customer insights work, right, if you set the expectations of the customer that you're going to make some changes, you have to keep them in the loop. You have to communicate with them. You have to let them know what's going on.
No, I think that is very on point, Vani. A lot of us in research and insights, I think those are some of the daily challenges that I went through when I was enrolled, similar to you, and I know a lot of your peers and colleagues probably go through that as well on a daily basis. Uh, an experience shared that I just wanted to do with you as well, with anybody watching, was sometimes what we've seen is, when we're talking about insights, especially on the lines of what you're talking about, where you've uncovered significant customer expectations or pain points that need to be addressed, right? And sometimes the momentum takes time to build, to get to those and to, to put words into action. In justifying or in making the insights more actionable, something that we began doing that helped a lot of our clients in the past was, especially in our journey work, when we uncover pain points or we uncover key moments of truth or insights that really mattered, what we do is we create multiple versions of the same journey map. We'll create one version that has insights, and maybe that has the level of detail that probably, folks in marketing or operations that really need to use that will rely on. But then for department heads and leaders across the company, what we do is we take the same journey map, and instead of putting insight percentages or reporting on those, we convert those into dollar amounts. And now the story is being told from the standpoint of, like you said, how does it benefit the company? How does it, putting it down simply into dollar amounts on profit or loss, where a profit could be either a revenue upside, that if we solve these pains, well, then this is how we can expect the customer experience to improve. And because of that, this is the upside in revenue that we can expect. Or if we solve for this, right now, this is a leakage in our business. And if we plug this, well, this is the dollar amount that we will stop from leaking. And then, this is a journey map, right? So different journey stages. And now you have these insights, but you've converted them into dollar amounts and you're adding them up throughout, right? And now all of a sudden, we see, the senior C-suite sort of sitting up and saying, oh, okay, so if we do this change here, it causes an impact over here and here. And wait a minute, now I'm either having this customer spend a lot more or we're losing a lot less. Yeah, tell me a little bit more about the changes you were recommending. And, so then you have that interest. So I just wanted to, sort of layer it on the insight that you shared, because yes, it's a big challenge to have good insights and then not have the momentum behind it. And so sometimes when we do that, it helps. Not all the time, but it helps sometimes.
Right. I mean, you're not going to win every battle, right?
Correct. But, that's great, Vani. I know we're at the end of our time, but I think it's been a great discussion. Do you have any final comments that you want to add before we go?
I'll just say one thing, right? And I kind of, alluded to this at the beginning. One of the things that I've learned, over the course of my time that I've spent with the companies and in marketing is it really needs to be about the customer. And I know we use a lot of words like, delighting the customers and customer experience. And again, none of this is new, right? But I think more and more we have to acknowledge, so we've got the sort of attitude that the customer is in the room. That whenever we're making decisions, whether it's a strategic plans, it's any sort of project we try to do, we try to consciously, as much as possible, right, put ourselves in the shoes of the customer and say, okay, if we did these things, what would be the impact on the customer? And again, it's not perfect, but it's part of that whole changing the behavior, change management that I talked about. That you start maybe having those type of conversations and it becomes part of your DNA as a company and the culture. And you see, very quickly, everyone across all levels in the company is talking about that or, is bringing the customer into the center of the conversation. For me personally, it's really, I think it all starts with the customer and ends with the customer, right? And that's why I love my current role because I'm in customer insights. So I'm able to, work with customers. I mean, obviously, in a perfect world, I would love to spend more time with the customers, which hopefully, going forward, I will be able to. But then with the communications and sort of that social, digital marketing role, it's about delivering a great customer experience. And I think we just need to, keep that in perspective.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your comments and your time, Vani. I think this was a lovely conversation, and hopefully we'll have many more around on the same topic. But thank you again so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Nitin, thank you so much for having me.